Should be a lot of fun. So we got a ton of ground to cover. We're going to try to get players we're targeting at every single position, including 2 in the outfield and 2 starting pitchers. So joining me on the panel, we got DJ Short, Anthony Tucker, DJ from Roto World NBC Sports, Anthony Tucker right here from Pitcher List. Let's just get right at it. Let's start behind the plate. DJ, I want you to throw me a catcher that you are targeting here in 2024.
So I really love Logan O'Hoppe with the Angels. We only got to see a little bit of him last year. Of course, he missed a lot of time with a shoulder injury, but when he was on the field, he was great. He was really productive, 14 home runs, 796 OPS, and just 199 plate appearances. And what I really liked, he returned in mid-August, right? Then he hits 10 home runs over his final 35 games. So to see that power still intact after he came back from the shoulder injury, really, really nice to see. I think not really getting the attention that he deserves going into drafts. So if you don't want to hit one of those top catchers, I think you can get a really nice value late. No Hoppy, big fan of him.
Yeah, I love that he made it back from the injury before the end of the season at all, but then also played that well, because a lot of times we see guys come off of a major shoulder injury and the power sap. They're pounding the ball on the ground. They don't have the same swing. That was not the case at all for O'Hoppe. So I love that call. I think he'll be a spring riser. I think as more and more people do their homework, he's going to creep up the board just a little bit. How about you, Anthony? Who are you targeting catcher this year?
Yeah, I definitely really like the O'Hoppe call there as well. A name in a similar tier in the draft pool, Wilson Contreras, around pick 142 in NFBC right now. And I just think the depth at catcher this year is really strong. And as a result, there are just some safe options that allow you to wait if you're willing to sacrifice that. If you're not willing to sacrifice, I should say, the opportunity cost of going out and getting like a strong SP2 or a closer in lieu of one of those top guys. And you can wait till, well past pick 100 for Wilson Contreras, who's hit 20 home runs or more in every full season since 2019. And I think he's a safe bet for around 120 combined runs and RBIs. I think when most people look back and think about Contreras' 2023, the first thing that's going to come into their mind is just the craziness of St. Louis announcing he'd no longer be their primary catcher and that he'd be a DH. Obviously, that was short-lived, but I think the plus side from a fantasy perspective of that, overall disaster that was the 2023 Cardinals was it distracted from the fact that Contreras was just an absolute force from June onwards. From June through the rest of the season, he had 339 with an OPS over 1,000 and a 188 WRC plus. He won't give you probably that same amount of power as a Francisco Alvarez, Mitch Garver, Logan O'Hoppe. But I think from my perspective, I'm willing to kind of sacrifice some of the upside for safety at a position, especially in 15-team leagues where you'll want 2 of them.
Yeah, I think with Contreras, it's a great call. I mean, he was my pick as well. And I think part of the reason for me is that for a long time, he's a top 5 catcher in terms of what it costs to get him in drafts. And I don't think anything's really changed skills-wise yet. I know he's on the wrong side of 30, but gets close to 500 plate appearances every year, 5 straight seasons with a double-digit barrel rate. I love that compared to a lot of other catchers, doesn't have quite as much swing and miss in that profile, so you're not taking on as much batting average risk. This is a great year for catchers, even 2 catcher leagues, which I've started to kind of rail against more recently. I think you can find 2 that you like almost anywhere on the board. The other thing I liked about Contreras, why I wanted to talk about him too, is the veterans are going to be better, almost certainly, right? I think they're going to get a little more from Arenado, a little more from Goldschmidt, and the young bats that they're going to rely on. You can see some combination of Nolan Gorman, Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn. You could see a couple of those guys, Lars Nootbaar, kind of young by inexperience, I guess. They could get a lot better with a lot of the guys around him. So the runs and RBIs could tick up even more here in 2024 for Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, that's a good call. I also want to mention just the personal aspect. St. Louis adjusting a year after Yadi Molina, like it was crazy the first half of last season, what was going on there, where they didn't seem like they knew what they wanted to do with Contreras and with their pitching staff. So I think just another year into this deal, I think he'll get more and more comfortable. The pitching staff will get comfortable with him. Of course, they have a whole new group of starters coming in there as well. And he'll get time during spring training to acclimate there. So I think just the comfort level in year 2 will be a lot better. And if we're talking about 2 catcher leagues, I'm looking at Henry Davis as like a super sleeper here. He's like in the high 300s in ADP right now. He's not going to qualify at catcher to begin the year in most fantasy leagues, but he's expected to be the primary catcher for the Pirates. Andy Rodriguez expected to miss the whole season, elbow surgery, UCL surgery. And Davis has been working a driveline this offseason. So I'm really interested to see what he looks like offensively during spring training. I think that could pay off really well.
Yeah, you got a little less than a half season's worth of plate appearances with the Pirates last year. Kept the K rate under 30%, which I think is always nice to see for anybody debuting. We've seen him control the zone really well as he moved through the Pirates system. He lost a lot of time to injury, too, so it's hard to make complete sense of what he did at Double and AAA. But when he was healthy, those numbers were really impressive. So I think you're right. You're going to see that catcher eligibility kind of pop up probably a couple of weeks into the season, given the needs they have. Really unfortunate injury for Andy Rodriguez, because I think we would like him quite a bit as a late target. There's probably a world where both of those guys could have caught if Rodriguez was healthy in 2024. But I like Davis even when there wasn't a prospect of him getting a chance to catch again this year as maybe like a fourth or fifth outfielder. So definitely a good call there. Let's shift the focus over to first base. Anthony, who do you like over at first base this year?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I think prefacing all of this with whenever we're targeting players or our draft strategies, kind of all dependent on where you're drafting, what pick you have. So if I locked up some steals in one of the first 2 rounds and I'm at the kind of the area of the draft where there's a Pete Alonso or a Vlad Guerrero Jr. on the board in the 3rd, those guys will be my targets of mine. If I can't get them, I do like Vinny Pasquantino going late. But to talk a little bit more about Guerrero Jr., I think sometimes it really just does go overlooked that he's still only going to be 25 this year. What we consider a down year for him is 26 homers, 94 RBIs. And if he just gets back to those 22 numbers where he had 32 homers and had a 274 average, I think he's a quality 3rd round pick at where he's going right now. Obviously, we've only seen him meet those lofty expectations once in 2021. But I'm willing to take a bet here in the 3rd round or around where he's going, pick 32 currently, that he's just going to continue to evolve as a hitter. We always talk about the high ground ball rate when we think about Vlad Guerrero Jr., but I think his high outside zone contact rate suggests he might just do a little better if he sacrifices putting the ball in play as frequently as he does in search of just looking for more ideal hard contact. Obviously, he hits the ball hard whenever he hits it, but waiting for some of those pitches, I think it sounds counterintuitive given that hard hit rate, but I think will pay some dividends in terms of just overall power. So I think the case for Vlad is just continuing to evolve as he starts to enter his prime.
Yeah, I've always wondered if an elite hit tool or a very good hit tool can sometimes be a curse, especially if you have as much raw power as Vlad Jr. does, because you end up hitting pitches that are not optimal pitches to launch out of the ballpark, and that kind of works against you, right? You're using a skill you have, but it's taking away from what is probably the best skill that you have. Counting stats should be there. Batting average floor, I think we just saw it in the 260s. I think there's a chance he'd get it up in the 280, 290 range again. Projections love him because of the age too. So definitely makes sense as an early target, a guy that could get you possible late 1st round value, but he goes in the 3rd round right now. How about you, DJ? Who do you like over at first base?
So I like Tristan Casas, right around the top 100 range, NFBC ADP right now. Just the final basically 3 months of the season last year, he was one of the best hitters in baseball. Hit .313 with 17 home runs and a .986 OPS over his final 73 games. And his quality of contact really backed it up. For the full season, he was 86th percentile in barrel rate, 80th percentile in hard hit percentage. So well, you love to see that when you go to the Baseball Savant page. You see the red, you see the strong second half, you see the good patience. The strikeout's not a major issue as well. So I see this as a player who's ready to take that next step over the course of a full season. So rather than taking a shot on like Cody Bellinger to back up what he did last year, Paul Goldschmidt to bounce back a little bit, wait a little while and get Casas.
Yeah, he's a good option where he's going right now. I think it's encouraging to see that the ground ball rate kind of spiked when he debuted. He got that under control last season, got that barrel rate up to 13% as well. Maybe a little bit of risk to sit occasionally against lefties, depending on how the final roster shakes out. That's probably the only small wart with Casas, but could also just take that next step and maybe push to be where Vlad Jr. is being drafted right now by this time next year. My choice at first base is Rhys Hoskins. I've wanted him to sign with the Brewers all winter. I'm not the only one who wanted that or made that connection, and it finally happened. Of course, he's a 31-year-old coming off of an ACL tear, so there is just a little bit of risk if there's any sort of lingering problem with that. Maybe they back off him early in the season, or I think they can just DH him if they have to, because they don't necessarily have an obvious DH in Milwaukee. So probably a guy that can get you well over 600 plate appearances, health permitting. When he does that, he's usually right around that 30 home run mark. You look at the batting average risk, it's normal for the position. He might hit 240 while doing it, but tons of runs, tons of RBIs. He goes from one good hitter's park to at least another good place to hit home runs, with the American Family Field still playing favorably in that regard. I look at where Hoskins has been going compared to Christian Walker, and Walker might project for 15 extra points of batting average, but I can't justify a 100 pick gap for 15 points in batting average.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as I saw that signing, I was like, yes. But then I was also a little upset because I know once we get closer to draft season, people are going to make that connection between the ballpark and obviously Hoskins, who puts the ball in the air a ton. We know the power is going to be there. So I agree. I love him as a late source of power.
Oh, did we lose DVR?
We did. All right. Well, maybe he'll pop back. Well, maybe he'll pop back in. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Back from the third dimension.
Okay, I was about to hijack the discussion, but we're back on track.
Lived in this place for 2 months. I've had no problem with the internet until PitchCon. So awesome. Looks like I don't have my tech situation figured out, but hopefully we're good to go the rest of the way. Let's move over to second base. DJ, I'll go with you first. Who do you like at second base this year?
So kind of boring, but I'm okay with it here. Thairo Estrada. So he played in 120 games last season, missed some time with hand injuries, fractured left hand, sprained left wrist. So 120 games, but he basically backed up counting stat wise what he did the year before. 14 home runs, 49 RBIs, 23 steals, 63 runs scored. Lots of volume near the top of the lineup. We'll see how the lineup looks now after their offseason acquisitions, but very productive fantasy-wise. I would expect him to still have a prominent place in that lineup. The other thing is he's great defensively. So his playing time's secure. Don't have to worry about that. Estrada, not overly sexy, but solid across the board. And I'm willing to wait on second base. After seeing some of those elite options come off the board, I think he could be a nice value.
Yeah, I think the glove is really important when you're looking for players that might have a little more playing time from the $10 to $15 range projections wise at this position, because a lot of second base eligible players are sort of like the first guy to lose time in their infield. And I think with Estrada, that could be something that kind of keeps him ahead of the pack, trying to chase that playing time down in San Francisco. Anthony, who do you like over at second base?
Yeah, I was looking at two guys, but the one I settled on was Ketel Marte. So entering last season, I think we had started to wonder, especially with the injuries, but if Ketel had started to, get the reputation of a one-hit wonder, despite all of the great StatCast numbers that he's repeatedly put up. And he mostly got back to what we had all hoped for last year: 94 runs, 82 RBIs. I think it's more than reasonable to expect similar numbers next season with what should be hitting at the top of an even better lineup. I wouldn't necessarily expect 25 homers again next season, and I don't think projections will either. But even if he hits only 20, I think you're getting an asset in at least three categories, and can be a real asset, especially in batting average. When, early in the draft, or excuse me, I should say later in the draft, maybe you're looking for a lot of power and you have to sacrifice some average. It's tough to turn steals down at second base, especially with some of the names going above him. But I think, if I'm willing to look for steals on the wire, then Marte's balanced skill set really makes sense where he's going after pick 100.
Yep.
Yeah, and if you come out of those first 5 or 6 rounds with plenty of bags, almost like ahead of target on a per roster slot basis, I think Marte is a great way to maybe pad the batting average and make sure you keep those counting stats up otherwise, because he's going to play every day so long as he's healthy. Contact quality is solid. Just a good all-around value where he's been going kind of in that pick 100 to 115 range in a lot of the drafts that I have seen. The guy that goes just a little bit before him at the position is kind of similar, but just a younger version of the same skills in some ways. Gleyber Torres. I think he's got more batting average upside than he did in the past. He's cut that K rate down a ton. This is his walk year. He's gone 3 years in a row with double-digit steals. You know, the 35-plus homer season we saw a few years ago, I'm not expecting anything like that. But you think about all the adjustments they've made to that Yankees lineup. You think about the possibility of not only having Soto there all year, but Anthony Volpe being better. Supporting cast could actually be better for Torres this year. I think because he's not quite a star, he almost gets a little overlooked there. But everything in that profile is just solid across the board. So he's another one of those players where I just like where he's going, kind of in the 90 to 105 range. And he fits almost any sort of build that you put together. So I think that's the nice thing about him too.
Yeah, I really like Torres as like a balanced contributor on your team. It allows you kind of go different directions, whether you're looking for power or speed later. One thing that when I was looking into him that I found really interesting, that his strikeout rate was below 15%, and was one of the best among qualified hitters. And that's not something that I necessarily would have expected to see. So it was another plus if you're looking for Glaber around pick 100.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep it moving through the middle infield. Let's head over to shortstop. Anthony, we'll throw this one to you first. Who are you targeting over at the shortstop position this year?
At shortstop, I am targeting O'Neal Cruz. I think this might come off as a little bit of a lazy comparison because we're always juxtaposing him next to Elly De La Cruz. But given their similar skill sets, it's really interesting to me that the difference in ADP is so stark right now. If you can get if you can get Elliott in the top 25, or that's where he's typically going, it's just really surprising to me that Cruz is still sitting around pick 80. He's also going 20 picks later than what his final ADP was a year ago. I think it's really just a case of he's out of sight, out of mind, even though he said he's 100% recovered from ankle surgery. We don't have much to go off of because he only played under 10 games last year. But I think if you're willing to bet that the strikeout rate, comes down to a number that's a little more palatable, I don't see a scenario where Cruz just doesn't rack up counting stats for you. It, helps you with power and speed. I think if I don't end up with one of those top couple shortstop options, he's the name that I'm really locking in on. If I end up looking for a shortstop for a middle infield spot, I also like in deeper leagues Vaughn Grissom. I think he's currently going at pick 428, and for that cost, I think he's a really solid middle infielder option. He'll definitely be an asset for average, I think, and he doesn't strike out a ton. He should get playing time, and Fenway might allow him to think about pulling the ball more, get a little more power than his current projections would suggest. So those are the two early and late for me.
Yeah, Grissom is such a funny player because we spent so much time last winter wondering if he could play shortstop well enough to take the job in Atlanta, and he really only played it by need. It's the only place he qualifies, but then he wins the playing time lottery this winter by getting traded to Boston. At least it looks that way because he can be the everyday second baseman there, play a defensive position that better suits him, and as a righty, gets the benefits of the Green Monster as well. If you start looking back at the minor league numbers Grissom's put together, they're really impressive. He had a 20 homer, 40 steal pace at high A as a 21-year-old. He only played 74 games there, so it was 11 homers and 20 steals. He's hit for high averages and had good OBPs almost everywhere he's been. So there's a lot of different ways for Vaughn Grissom to be a good fantasy player. It might just be a little bit of everything, but it might be one or two of those categories popping a little bit more than expected.
For sure, yeah. I wasn't really buying the hype with Grissom going into last year because you could hear the hesitation and the Braves' discussion of Grissom going into spring training even last year. And again, there was a lot of question if you looked at the defensive metrics if Grissom could handle shortstop. So that did play out. But a year later, here he is, fantasy sleeper again. I think he has a good chance to deliver on that.
Definitely. Who do you like at shortstop this year, DJ?
So this is not a bold take, but I love Gunnar Henderson to potentially deliver first round value. And Henderson had a very large hole to dig out of last season. It's easy to forget because of how he finished the year, obviously, but he was basically under 200 in June. And over his final 100 games, hit 276, 23 homers, 8 steals, 856 OPS, also scored 72 runs. in that 100 game time span. So, it's dangerous to project it out over a full season, but we're talking about a guy who could give you 30 plus homers, could potentially drive in 100 runs and score 100 runs, give you double-digit stolen bases. And what I also like about Gunnar Henderson is that we're talking about shortstops here, but also qualifies at third base. I love taking a multi-position eligible player early because it just opens up so many possibilities depending upon how the rest of the board plays out. So I like Henderson for what he can do on the field, but also the versatility that he gives your roster over the course of a draft.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see how they make all the pieces fit in the infield, because I assume we're going to see a lot of Jackson Holiday this year.
Yeah.
I think Jordan Westberg is someone that I really like. We'll probably talk about him shortly. Like, he's going to play somewhere on this infield. They have to find a way to do it, but if they keep moving everybody around, that's great for us because that's more versatility throughout the draft process, and not knowing what's going to fall at a certain position or in a certain category. Having that is such a nice thing to kind of work with. How about you, Anthony? Who do you like?
For shortstop or third base?
Oh, my bad. You already got the shortstop in there. I was gonna throw a couple out there that basically are the same kind of player for me, in the sense that most likely I've got a shortstop already. I really like Bo Bichette early. I like Gunnar early. But if it just happens I haven't addressed shortstop early on, I like Trevor Story and Willy Adames. And if I'm addressing middle infield, it's sort of like, if I need speed, I'm leaning on Story. If I need power, I'm leaning on Adames. I think they're both max volume players, just in terms of how much they're going to be leaned on by their respective teams. First 2 years in Boston probably couldn't have gone worse for Trevor Story. Once he came back last year, we saw the speed and got to see what he could do with the new rules. He was 10 for 13 in like 40 games as a base stealer. So I think you're looking at 30 plus steals pretty easily. I think the projections are a little bit light on his batting average, even though we know he's not going to hit for 280, 290 type averages the way he could back in his time in Colorado. I don't think his true talent is the 203 to 238 range that we've seen in these first 2 years with the Red Sox. So I think you could add 10, 15 points to his batting average projection. Maybe you end up getting 20 homers, but even if you're just playing more of like a 15 homer, 30, 35 steal projection, that's huge value where he's going in that kind of pick 150 range. And for Willy Adames, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of batting average downside. He had a concussion last year in May. He just wasn't the same player for a good stretch after that. I think he gets to 25 home run power pretty easily. And this is a guy that if he gets traded, he's probably going to still play every day for his new team mid-season because he's going to be one of the better available shortstops on the market. So a lot of ways for it to go right, really, with both of those guys.
Yeah, I'm into it. I'm really interested to see what the Brewers do this season, whether they fall out of it and the pieces that they may end up trading. Corbin Burns going into his walk year as well. So that is a situation to watch for sure.
Let's move it on over to third base. DJ, we'll go to you first. Who do you like at the hot corner?
Well, you mentioned Rhys Hoskins with the move to Milwaukee. I like Jeimer Candelario going to Cincinnati. So set new career highs last season, 22 homers, 70 RBIs. I've always thought of him as more of a doubles hitter, so that adding that home run power was great. But if you look at Baseball Savant, you can check that little where it has all the ballparks and where they would max out, and it just happens to be Great American Ballpark. Would have hit 30 there last year. So I was a little surprised by the destination given the logjam of players there in Cincinnati, but just kind of underscoring the logic here in a great launching pad for home runs, in a fun lineup supporting cast. Looks like a clear top 12 third baseman to me.
Yeah, you get a little bit of the flexibility being able to move in between the two corner spots as well. Yeah. And I think as you start to try and parse out what the Reds are going to do with playing time around the infield, DH, and even in left field, it seems like they got a couple of guys like Spencer Steer that they might rotate through that spot as well. I think money talks as far as figuring out who gets the most playing time. You wouldn't seek out Candelario in free agency and give him that contract if you didn't think he was going to be an everyday guy. So yeah, it gets a pretty huge park boost with the move into Cincinnati. How about you, Anthony? Who do you like over at third base?
Yeah, really agree on Candelario as well. I think he's going to be that mainstay given the contract. I went with a guy who's being drafted a bit earlier, and that's Manny Machado. Doing this whole exercise, looking at the draft pool, I think Machado is going to be one of the biggest risers by ADP when we look back on this in a couple months. I think once spring training game starts and we start to see him take some at-bats, he's going to start really moving up from where he's going, and that's after pick 60 currently. Until that happens, until he moves up a lot, I'm very happy to take that discount. I think when it's all said and done, he ends up going probably a lot closer to Bo Bichette and Jose Altuve instead of just behind Nico Horner and Matt McClain. He might be limited to DH at the onset of the regular season, but from a fantasy perspective, as long as he's in the lineup, looks healthy, I think it's possible that we're just giving him too much of a discount because of that surgery, that elbow surgery. As far as I understand, it was to address tennis elbow, and it seems like fielding will be more of an issue than hitting. In a down year where he did have that elbow pain, he still hit 30 homers and 91 RBIs. Another safe pick, in my opinion, about as safe as anyone, despite that injury, to get over 600 plate appearances. Obviously, a max playing time type of player, given his history. Even if he does kind of delay a little bit and he's on the back end of that 4 to 6 month recovery timeline, just really stood out for me as a guy who you can target as early as the beginning around 4.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he is going to creep up the draft board as long as we see him kind of getting every other day starts, the usual veteran workload in the spring. Even if it's coming at DH, that's going to increase confidence that everything's fine. It was extensor tendon surgery. Easy for me to say. So not a typical arm injury that we hear about, but he played through it at the end of last season. And like Anthony said, the power was still there the entire time. So he should be able to continue to produce. I like Jordan Westburg as a late third base eligible player, even though I think he probably fits in more at second base. My assumption is Jackson Holliday is the shortstop. Gunnar Henderson plays third if that happens. But Westburg has nothing left to prove at AAA. He has spent basically a full season there, split over 2 years, hit 283, 366 OBP, 36 homers, 15 steals in 158 games. And this is the International League, not the PCL. So we're not talking about, El Paso and Albuquerque and all these high altitude environments where the ball flies. This is just really good production. And I think there's a lot of ways for him to be useful to us as a fantasy player. It's not just that versatility. When he came up, he kept the K rate down. It was under 25%, had a hard hit rate of 44.5%. So if he starts getting the ball up in the air a little bit more often, we're going to get some more power. And I think there's a decent amount of speed there. I think when you get 20 homers and 10 steals from somebody who goes outside the top 200, you're typically doing well. And especially if that player is not going to hurt you in batting average, which I think is the case with Westburg.
Yeah, there's so much young talent there in Baltimore that I think if you don't have that initial success, like you just start to kind of go to the back of the minds of some fantasy managers. And with Jackson Holliday, at least likely to compete or maybe win the starting shortstop job during spring training, maybe that takes a little bit of pressure off Westburg that all eyes on him. So I'll be fascinated to see how he looks in the spring as well and what sort of role there might be for him coming into this season.
Let's move it over to the outfield. We're going to have a couple picks each in this spot. Anthony, let's get your first one. Who's one of your first outfield targets?
Yeah, my first target is Seiya Suzuki. For both of his 2 years in the majors now, started really slowly. Even though he did have those struggles, his batted ball data has always looked solid. He ended up finishing last season with 20 homers and a 285 average. Things really just changed for him in early August. He was given, I won't call it a benching, but he was rested for a few days by the Cubs. And once he re-entered the lineup, his bat was scalding. He hit 356 with an OPS over 1,000 and tacked on 11 homers from August 9th on. So just looked really great down the stretch from August on forward. And I think where his projections are currently, Steamer is more or less projecting him for a repeat of 2023, but I think we could see some more power. His pull rate did jump 8 percentage points last year. He also has a 114 max exit velocity. So I'm willing to bet that we haven't seen the best of Seiya Suzuki yet, particularly with his power numbers.
Yeah, there's a ton of red on that StatCast page, and he controls the zone well. Could be a max volume player. 79th percentile in sprint speed. It was a weird low success rate on the base pass.
Yeah.
I think that's a fluke. I think he's still going to get chances to run If he continues to struggle in that facet, maybe they'll shut him down this year. But I'm optimistic there could be a little bit of a bounce back in that category too. Always nice to get those non-zero contributions. Do you guys think the Cubs are done? Like their roster just looks like 85% done to me. It seems like they have to make at least one more impact.
They should bring back Cody Bellinger at this point. Because for a while I was thinking, oh, maybe Rhys Hoskins makes sense there. Like that would be perfect for first base. But now that he's off the board, it's like where do you go if you're legitimately competing this season, which it seems like they want to do. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out that possibility of a return for Bellinger at this point.
Yeah, it seems like it's still a good fit.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think if you're grading the Cubs offseason right now, it's kind of just like an incomplete. Like it just doesn't feel finished yet. And I do think that the answer probably is Cody Bellinger when it's all said and done.
Unless the ownership angle in giving Craig Counsell all that money was, let's build an 82-win roster and see if you can squeeze 88 or 90 wins out of it, like then this doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, Bellinger coming back. I think Matt Chapman would fit really well there because I can't take Nick Madrigal seriously as a potential starter at third base. I think we've seen enough of Patrick Wisdom. I know they added Michael Busch. It sounds like he's more likely to play first than third, even though he could play third. So something has to give there, be that the reunion with Bellinger, the addition to Chapman, or something else that we're not even discussing right now. It just feels a little bit light. How about you, DJ? How about a target from you in the outfield?
So I'm willing to take a shot on Jazz Chisholm Jr. So he is coming back from surgery. As you know, he dealt with turf toe for a good portion of last season, also missed time with an oblique injury, also had injuries in 2022, but the expectation is he'll be ready to go for spring training. But if you look at the last two seasons, 157 games, which tells you he hasn't played a whole lot, but still it's almost a nice 162 game sample. 33 home runs, 97 RBIs, 34 steals, 90 runs scored. The batting average is, I would take 250 with the strikeout rate that he has. But assuming he's healthy, those are first round type of numbers. And if you look at the pocket in the draft where Chisholm's going right now, it's like, do you believe in Nolan Jones? Do you believe in Cody Bellinger? Mike Trout's there. Are you going to get a full season out of Trout, who doesn't run either anymore? Christian Yelich, Josh Lowe is what he did last year for real. So I love that pocket for Chisholm, just what he could do across the board. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, given his ADP. I love it there.
Yeah, I think the per game numbers are excellent. I mean, it does look like a 30-30 potential season could be there with health. And I think that's even with struggles against lefties. He's capable of that. Yeah. He seems comfortable running as much as he's on base. Maybe we see a little bit of improvement in the K rate. We're not seeing a ton of evidence that it's happening, but he's still young enough. He's missed enough time to where I could see it. Clearly an important piece in Miami and really took to the outfield well. Looked really good in center field too. So I think that might give him a chance to see enough lefties to possibly improve against them, or at least not lose some counting stats from sitting down against them. A guy that you have to kind of think about from a batting average perspective, though, having a little bit of a cushion built in. I don't think he's going to offer a whole lot in that category, but I'm with you, DJ. I like where he is going right now as well. I'm going more to the mid rounds for my first outfielder. I like Chas McCormick quite a bit. I think it's interesting that the early draft market has loved Yainer Diaz, and for good reason. Like on a per game basis, I see why people are turning to him for some power at the catcher position, but I'm surprised people aren't more in love with McCormick because Michael Brantley retired. Dusty Baker's gone. I know he's going to be 29 in April, and McCormick wasn't ever like a highly regarded prospect, but there's power, there's speed. He feasted on fastballs. He does a lot of the same things, categorically speaking, that Nolan Jones does. And I'm not even a Nolan Jones skeptic. I just look at this as an opportunity to get someone that could help you in all five categories and see more playing time this year. Biggest difference in the two, Jones has more raw power, has the better home park being a Coors, but in that pick 150 range, this is a really solid outfielder that could actually be their best defensive center field option too. And that could be part of why that playing time jumps up to more of an everyday role this year.
Yeah, I like it. I'll be interested to see what happens with that Astros lineup, obviously with Dusty Baker no longer overseeing it. If there are some thoughts on maybe there's some more volume coming his way as well. So I'm into that as someone who really doesn't get a lot of attention either. I think we could see that change this year.
Let's get a second outfield target from you, Anthony. Who else do you like at the position?
Yeah, so my second name going just right after pick 250 currently is Tyler O'Neill. Don't have a ton of interesting things to say here other than O'Neill feels like he could just be really one of those prime change of scenery candidates. Seemingly time and time again, we've seen an outfielder leave the Cardinals and then suddenly make good on their potential. Obviously, well discussed how fractured that relationship was with between O'Neill and Ali Marmol. So I don't think it's really a stretch to think he'll be a bit rejuvenated outside of St. Louis. He should have an everyday lineup spot as well, which helps. I don't really think that moving to Fenway is going to help his power numbers all that often because they don't really need helping. Hitting the ball far has never really been a problem for Tyler O'Neill. But it's certainly having the green monster there. It won't hurt his batting average. Steamer has him getting back to 248, which I think would definitely be a number you can deal with if you're drafting him for his power potential. And at this point in the draft, I think he's just an ideal risk to take because he's got the clear starting role in Boston. He combines that with a power profile that could lead to a comeback season, maybe in comparison to a guy like Jorge Soler. Last year, Soler was drafted outside the top 250, had a down year in 2022, and then it really paid dividends in 2023 if you took a risk on him. So where he's going, the likelihood of him hitting his upside, I don't know what that is, but I do know if he does hit it, it's just really going to pay dividends for you.
Yeah, I mean, what he did in 2021 is sort of just etched into our brains as like a possible level he could get back to. I think the one thing that's really interesting about Tyler O'Neill is that he could pull more fly balls. He's capable of it, or at least when he does, really good things happen. As a righty in Fenway, I wonder if that'll be part of his approach anyway, just trying to rip balls against the monster and over the monster. So maybe that'll be a way to tap back into some of that power. I think the most fascinating thing about him from a skills perspective, for as like strong as he is, he runs really well. He just looks like a guy that would be a little more of a lumbering guy on the base pass, but he's not. Even around leg injuries, he's been efficient as a base stealer too. So I like that call quite a bit for Tyler O'Neill. I think they're going to prioritize him as a heavy part of that outfield mix. Should be close to everyday playing time for him with the move to Boston. How about you, DJ? How about another target from the outfield?
So looking pretty deep here, I like Matt Wallner. I find him pretty interesting. His ADP is outside the top 300 currently. I think with Royce Lewis and everything that he did, both in the limited time we saw him in the majors last year and in the postseason when he was insane, Eddie Julien gets a lot of attention too. But Wallner was really good in his time with the Twins last year. 14 home runs, 877 OPS, and 76 games. And what you like to see is when the stats match the quality of contact, and that certainly was the case with Wallner in terms of barrel rate, but also hard hit rate, average exit velocity, all that good stuff. His expected slugging was 517, good patience. I think the strikeouts will keep the batting average down, but I could see 30 homers for sure on the strong side of a platoon. Now, he's not going to play against lefties, most likely. He was terrible against lefties last season, but when you're looking that late in a draft, mostly you're looking for cheap power. And if you're in a league where you can make daily lineup changes, he's gold.
Yeah, I like that cheap power play as well. I kind of think it's worthwhile, especially in leagues where you have 5 outfielders, to take one shot at a player with this skill set, because if it all clicks, it's 35 to 40 homers. It's really hard to know going into a season if injuries or small sample success against lefties or whatever that little thing is that can be the difference maker, if that's actually going to happen. But Wallner certainly has the underlying traits you're looking for, and someone that can just go off from a power perspective. Similar player for me, Nelson Velasquez. Like I think he goes just a little earlier than Wallner, but maybe Wallner's a good fallback plan if you miss on Velasquez. A barrel rate over 20% last year. It was only 179 plate appearances in the big leagues, but the Royals, they're just looking for answers. They're looking for pieces to build around. I don't think there's anyone that's going to really push him for playing time. I think what's encouraging is he handled the same-handed pitching just fine. As a righty especially, it reduces the likelihood of a small side platoon anytime soon. So it's probably a difference maker from a power perspective. We did see some steals from Velasquez throughout his time in the minors, so not having any in 53 games last year might be a little bit of an outlier, but you're drafting him for cheap power. You can take a little bit of a batting average hit if you've built in the cushion, and I don't think the Royals have any compelling reason to avoid giving him 550, 600 plate appearances this year.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where the power settles with him. With me, it could it could range wildly depending on how he looks this season. But the speed, yeah, the volume should be there. We know the Royals like to run, so for me, it's just about the power.
Absolutely. Well, this is PitchCon, so we should probably talk about some pitchers that we like. And DJ, I'll throw this one to you first. We'll go with starting pitchers. One starting pitcher that you are trying to target in your drafts this season.
Yeah, so give me Walker Buehler. So ADP right in that top 100 range. So currently right outside the top 20 starting pitchers. And for me this year, I don't tend to be super aggressive early with starting pitchers. I think there's, 2 or 3 I'm like, okay, they make sense at the top, but it really opens up from there. So I think Buehler can be one of those real pitchers that you build around on your roster. There are some risks and questions coming back from Tommy John surgery. Of course, he could have come back last year. The Dodgers shut him down early, but it wasn't due to injury. And you just look at when Buehler's at his best, 2018 to 2021. One of the most reliable pitchers in all of baseball, 2.82 ERA and 564 innings, more than a strikeout per inning with good control, great situation with the Dodgers. We'll see how many innings he throws. I think that's the big variable we're really not sure about, but I think there's a really good chance he hits the ground running and reclaims that fantasy ace status at really a discount.
Yeah, I think we should have a quick exercise here. Let's take the 4 Dodgers pitchers who throw the most innings. Who would you say is in the top 4, and how would you rank them? I'll give you the projections first. You can agree with the projections if you want. ATC's got Yamamoto at 171, Miller at 154, Glasnow at 141 1/3, and Buehler at 132 2/3. So do you agree with the order of those 4? And then do you have any issues with the numbers on those 4?
I disagree slightly on the order. I think Yamamoto and Miller are correct. I think they'll be 1, 2. I don't really count on Tyler Glasnow to throw that many innings. So I think Buehler will throw more, even though he's in his first season coming back from Tommy John surgery. I think whatever Glasnow will throw will be elite, but I can't count on that kind of workload for him.
Okay. How about you, Anthony? How do you see it shaking out?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with the order. I think I would put Miller ahead, number 1. I also just don't trust, like DJ had said, that Glasnow will be able to give you that high inning volume. The Dodgers are just interesting because they can probably just work from opening day onwards with October in mind. So I think I'm probably, if I'm looking at their innings totals, I'm probably taking the under if I had to bet on them, because they can just, work in extra guys to just build towards having, healthy, fresh arms as much as you could, reasonably plan for in October.
Yeah, I think they've done such a good job with depth that they can consistently use a 6-man rotation whenever they want. They can afford to give guys extra days off as needed, and it's not going to hurt them that much in the regular season. Their goal just seems to be having at least a big 3 of that group ready to go in October, because any combination of Yamamoto, Miller, Glasnow, a healthy Buehler, those are guys you don't want to see in October. That's a potentially filthy combination, no matter who's in it.
James Paxton apparently on the way too. Just really fits into that similar mold for the Dodgers, where the upside is quite high, but you have no idea how many innings you're going to get. But the Dodgers have Emmett Sheehan, they have Ryan Yarbrough, who can be kind of a bulk guy at the start of games. Maybe Clayton Kershaw comes back during the summer, for the final 2 months in the postseason. So lots of ways this could go, which is going to make the Dodgers. I mean, they were fascinating to begin with, but even more fascinating to see how they piece this together.
So if you're wondering who's been drafting Tyler Glasnow early, me. I'm the one that's doing it. I'm the optimist. I'm the one that says 160 plus is in play. We saw him do it, I think, split between the minors and the big leagues a little earlier in his career. We've seen more normal workloads or close to full workloads. So I think it's possible with a little bit of massaging. I think they're going to get where they need to go with Tyler Glasnow's innings. He ends up being a top 5 starter for me. So he's an early target for me. He wasn't my choice for this panel, but I like Glasnow. How about you, Anthony? A starting pitcher you're targeting?
Yeah, Joe Musgrove is my first one. I keep using the word, I think, in a couple different positions, safe. And I think if you're looking for a safe pitcher in the draft pool, that's Joe Musgrove. He's currently being drafted behind a group of arms that I just straight up I'd rather prefer the floor that Musgrove brings. He's going currently behind Justin Steele, Kyle Bradish, and Dylan Cease are just a couple that come to mind for me as guys who I prefer to have Musgrove. I think he can be a really good value for your SP2. Obviously, what's bringing down his draft position currently are those injury concerns. He had the elbow bursitis last year and then ended up hitting the IL for the remainder of the season with that shoulder capsule inflammation. But, assuming health, which obviously you can't always assume health, but his ratios over the last 3 years are just tough to find in this environment. He has had 3 straight seasons of an ERA under 3.2 and a WHIP under 1.15. So he might not have kind of that sky high upside of some of the guys that you're looking for who are drafted around or a little above Musgrove, but I think he'll be a really good bet to anchor your ratios when healthy.
Yeah, Musgrove has been excellent as a Padre. The stuff's good. It would be a really good result, I think, anywhere he was pitching. That I feel like he's getting an extra bump from Petco, and I think I look at that and I think, okay, the trade they made, the Juan Soto trade, bringing back Michael King, Randy Vasquez, Johnny Brito, Drew Thorpe, like all these guys they brought back, they're going to rely a lot on that group. King especially. King is the buzzy guy right now, and somehow in all of this, I feel like Yu Darvish is sort of lost. Like nobody is excited about Yu Darvish, and I just think the floor is high for almost anybody pitching in the San Diego rotation, but we've seen it from Darvish before.
Right. I think we need to see these guys in the spring, and once we do, they're going to move up because they're more brand names. I think that's especially the case for Musgrove, who could easily be a top 20 starter, when the spring's all said and done.
Yeah, maybe people treat him as I'm waiting for an ace type if he's completely healthy and looks good throughout the spring. I guess I could see that as a possibility. I actually like Kyle Bradish, where he's going, and the breakout sort of started in the second half of 2022. He went full throttle last year, picked up a little extra velo on the fastball, used the slider and the curveball for a lot of those swinging strikes. He's one of those guys that when I look at the Stuff Plus model, the numbers are on par with that of like Corbin Burns. And I wonder if maybe because Bradish wasn't a prospect people got excited about, if there's a little bit of lag where people aren't fully buying into what he did last year, even though it was excellent. And the other big thing with him is it's just a different environment now at Camden Yards. The changes they made to that ballpark are jarring. Like for so many years, we've had issues where the pitching wasn't good, but the park was one you avoided. You took your kind of like SP4s, 5s, and 6s, and you were really careful about pitching them in Baltimore just because you were afraid the park was going to hurt you. Now it's a place where you feel good about home starts for guys with good skills, and you actually kind of seek that park out as one where you can maybe get away with throwing guys that you didn't want to have in your lineup before. So just a weird thing that's changed a lot, but I think Kyle Bradish could be an ace in disguise, probably someone that gets drafted outside the top 20 among starting pitchers in a lot of leagues, but finds his way back inside that group by season's end.
Yeah, I'm going to stay with the Orioles for my second pick here. And this is someone I would take a shot on really late in a draft to see if they could outperform the ADP, and that's John Means. We haven't seen a full season from him since 2021, posted a 3.62 ERA, kind of outpitched his metrics, but that was also in the former dimensions of Camden Yards. He hasn't had a full season in that ballpark with these new dimensions. I'm really interested to see what he can do. He was shut down early last season, too, as he came back from Tommy John surgery, and that was a little bit due to soreness. But we'll have to see how he looks in the spring. I really want to see the velocity, too. But, assuming everything checks out, he's someone I'm going to be going after. Good situation, good lineup, should be a lot of support there. So he's someone I'll be watching really closely.
Means was just such a found money sort of pitcher. If you picked him up in a keeper or a dynasty league, especially, he was probably a near min bid sort of player. Didn't have any sort of real trade value in a lot of leagues, but you just kept throwing him out there and you kept getting good ratios. It was kind of amazing. It sort of came out of nowhere. I think he was their all-star in one of those really bad rebuilding years too. So turning into a good story as a part of this Orioles rebuild. Anthony, how about another starter from you?
Yeah, so I am actually going to go with Cubs starter Shota Imanaga. And I think targeting him is really a case of me just trusting a lot of the great pitching analysts out there, like Nick, Lance Prosdowski, reading and watching all their content. There's just a lot of really smart minds who are bullish on this signing from the Cubs from a real life perspective. It just has me wanting to buy in fantasy drafts as well, where he's going, which is after pick 200. The great command that he has creates a pretty high floor for a guy going this late. And then from everything we've seen in last year's WBC, plus how well his fastball and slider rated out in that tournament by Stuff Plus, it just creates a lot of intrigue. The induced vertical break, vertical approach angle on his fastball are I think, going to be really important for him as he looks to rein in that home run issue that he had in Japan. And it suggests that maybe it might not be as much of a problem here in the States if he's able to take that four-seamer and get it up in the zone. And obviously, I think that's, one of the things most people are expecting him to do once he debuts. On top of all this, he also just comes to the majors with a relatively clean injury history, which is, I think something to look for in terms of this point in the draft. You can get some floor, some upside, and a guy who you're not necessarily expecting to throw 200 innings in his first year over here, but he's also not coming here with a laundry list of arm or shoulder injuries.
Yeah, one thing about Imanaga is that we're going to see a ton of gifts from him in the spring. Like I know it's going to come, and he's going to be one of those players. Like assuming that the strikeouts are going to be there, I think they will be as hitters adjust to him during spring training. I think he's going to probably be pretty popular, which is okay. Right now he's outside the top 200. I don't think he's going to go up considerably, but I do think him to be one of those buzzy names that people are going to want to watch his starts during spring training.
Oh, for sure. I think I've seen top 30 starting pitcher thrown out there as a ceiling sort of for him in year one. He's not being drafted like that right now. The earliest he's gone in an NFBC draft the last 7 days is pick 169, so it's still outside the first 10 rounds of a 15-team draft. So there's a little bit of room for him to move up and still end up being a pretty good bargain here in year one with the Cubs. I'm going to submit Nick Lodolo's name to the group. There have been 28 starting pitchers with a K-BB percentage of 20% or higher since the start of 2022, and Lodolo is one of them. Other than the park, I mean, what's not to like? I guess the injury history could scare you a little bit, but really talented young pitchers like this that can be difference makers, that could be number 2s, number 3s for a fantasy rotation, going outside the top 200 and even later than that, I think right now for Lodolo, that's a huge opportunity. It's kind of like how I felt about Tarek Skubal as he was working his way back from injury. It was just, to me, like, it's only a matter of time. Once he's healthy, I want him in my rosters. I want to see what he can do. And I mean, he's probably exceeded even the most optimistic sort of projection as far as where he's being drafted right now. I get those kind of vibes from Lodolo. The other thing too is the Reds offseason, like the Frankie Montas addition is pretty interesting. They added Nick Martinez, but they didn't go all out trying to upgrade. And I think that's an indication to us that Lodolo is supposed to be healthy and a big part of their plans for this year.
Yeah, I agree. I love Hunter Green too. If he can stay out there for a full season, he can strike out 220 plus batters. So there's some fun arms in that Reds rotation. And I would have liked Montas if he had landed in a better situation. Like maybe I'd be talking about him as a sleeper. Maybe not at this point, but hey, I'm interested to see how he looks in the spring and how healthy he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think with Lodolo, there was a lot of excitement around him last year, and I am curious, like, why that excitement is seemingly dissipated. So I think this is a good, in terms of Lodolo's like long-term stock, a good buy low opportunity because not a lot has changed other than a lot of the injuries that he had last year. So I think it might be a little bit of a delayed breakout for Lodolo in 2024.
Well, we should move on to closers. We got just a couple minutes here before Nick's going to pop back in and give us the hook. Let's start with you, Anthony. Who do you like as a closer target this year?
Yeah, definitely will keep it brief. I don't know that I have necessarily one target. I think I just, look at the total number of closers that I'm comfortable with having as, my top guy, and then just getting one that's at the back of that pool. So that for me is probably Evan Phillips or maybe Tanner Scott. In terms of Evan Phillips, I think he's obviously got the team context. Last year, he had 24 saves. He had excellent ratios. And I think if you're not willing to pay the full freight on the, Emmanuel Clases or Edwin Diaz or the other, Devin Williams, those top guys, I think in terms of the save totals, he'll be really helpful. And I think he's not a, he's not a guy who I'm worried about when he takes the mound that he's going to damage my ratios.
Yeah, I agree on Phillips. He was my choice too. And I think with Josh Hader being out there for so long, there was a little bit of like, are the Dodgers just going to swoop in here and sign Hader? They didn't. And I think Phillips is a beneficiary, obviously. And I think we'll likely see his ADP go up a little bit higher. I like Phillips a lot too, like you said, with the team context. And I'd say that for Clay Holmes for the same reason. So if you're going to be super aggressive with those top 10 closers, like if you get 2 from this pocket, Tanner Scott's another good option. I think you're going to be in really good shape. It's amazing. Holmes doesn't get a ton of respect, but he's pretty good last year. And he's the primary guy there. I don't see like a big threat to his job. He basically had a really bad stretch that pulled up the ERA, but for the most part, really backed up what he did the year before. So I'm in on Holmes as well.
I think the other guy that goes in this range, and it's similar to the strategy Anthony was talking about, I want to make sure I get at least one closer that I trust. Usually I get in a little earlier than this, but Ryan Helsley goes around this same range. And the walk rate jumped up a little bit in 2023, but I love that he misses more bats than most other closers you're going to find. 35% K rate again in 2023. We've seen near 40% from him in the past. Injuries are really the only thing that could hold him back. I think he's pretty clearly their preferred guy so long as he's healthy. So there could be 35 plus saves incoming with just a ridiculous K rate and some great ratios from Helsley this year.
Yeah, I really like a Ryan Kerkering too at the Phillies. Like Craig Kimbrell's not going to be there anymore. Is Jose Alvarado better and more of an earlier high leverage spot than pitching the 9th inning? So we saw the Phillies really put him in some important spots during the postseason last year. So clearly they trust him. The stuff's really good. So he's someone I'm watching really closely as well.
I just wish I could worry as little about command as the architects of that Phillies bullpen. Like they're just all stuff.
Rip it.
Yeah, it's fun to watch if you're not a Phillies fan. I think if you're a Phillies fan, it's a little unnerving because you're like, yeah, it's filthy, but we really don't know what's going to happen when you give it to me.
Yeah.
Well, I will say the closer pool is a lot deeper than I had realized before kind of diving into my prep. So that was one, I think, pleasant surprise of looking through where guys are going and just how many reliable closers you can find this year.
Yeah, if you prefer kind of the old established veteran, I mean, Kenley Jansen, pretty affordable, still in that pick 125 range, goes a little behind the rest of this group. I think if you pair someone like that with a better skilled guy, I think that's the right approach if you want to make sure you lock in 2 closers, but you could try to invest late. Kerkering's a great name that goes a little bit later that I think could take that job and run with it in Philadelphia. Before we get the boot, DJ, what do you got coming up here in the next few weeks?
So we are launching our Roto-World Fantasy Baseball Draft Guide. The online edition comes out middle of next week. The magazine we put out annually should be on newsstands next week as well. So definitely check that out. We'll have the Roto-World Baseball Show, our podcast, coming back at the end of the month. We'll go position by position, breaking down all the names to know. Nice. How about you, Anthony?
Yeah, we're starting to think through all of the great content we're going to have in the spring training for the fantasy section on Pitcher List. So thinking through that. And then I also write the weekly 2-start pitcher articles once the regular season kicks off. So looking forward to diving into a lot of the content that we're going to have over the next 2 or so months.
Very cool. We are off and running with the position previews at Rates and Barrels. So it's been a busy couple of weeks. We started the hitters last week, pitcher week coming up next week. So heavy load of podcasts, but always a lot of fun getting those out because it feels like it's the right time of year. It feels like spring training is now just around the corner.
It helps me do my draft prep to do these episodes, honestly. So it's a great exercise every year.
Definitely. And I just want to say thanks again to Nick for putting all this together. If you can make a donation, pitcherlist.com/PitchCon, we'd really appreciate that. Strikeout ALS, just a horrible disease. Let's just do everything we can to hit that goal here in the next couple of days.
Absolutely.